issue, isn't it?
It was consistently applied,
No,
I thought.
no.
Well, I saw penalties both ways for the exact same offence, and I've seen it all through
But I
these
mean, at the
super
start, in fact,
periods.
no, it was first match last season. We got a penalty for blatantly just throwing the ball at a player who was
Yeah.
to get back on side. And we were given the penalty for it. So it's something I think that started last season. They tried to introduce it, didn't they, to get away from this deliberate or accidental offside in these positions. But it's just led to a situation where players are now abusing the rule in a different way.
Yeah, exactly. Now instead of passing it into people, they're kind of trapping people in to below them and then quickly playing the ball into them.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's not, if that's what any of those players want to see when they watch a game of rugby league, then they need to realise that they're not going to get a career out of this sport for very much longer, because people aren't going to want to watch that shit.
No.
Neil McEwen at Neil McEwen 4600. I like to take your views on this one, Sarah, because we're going to get this come up a lot, but this sort of stuff come up. But he says whoever packs down the scrum to stop the clock should be the same players that are in the scrum when play continues. Now, I think the NRL kind of do this now. What do you think to that?
I quite like it as an idea, actually. It's something that we've often said on the terrace. Well, on the terrace, and you don't have terracing anymore, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
In the stands, because you see, your two wingers, your centre, your halfbacks there forming this scrum, and then the clock gets stopped and they move away, and your big fat props come in when they've essentially meandered down.
And all that swapping around of players, I know the clock's off and stuff, but it takes a bit longer. Whereas if you made them stay in the same place, they're gonna be a bit faster. Okay, Tom Andrews, I'll take this one at Tom_HKR because I expect something naughty is coming from Tom from a Sarah point of view. So he says, simulation in brackets diving should see a penalty given to the opposition. I don't think it's worthy of a yellow, but giving penalties would quickly rid it of the game. He said, I'd like a dropout timer to be brought in, like in the NRL. He says, a less dumb obstruction rule. And he says, if I'm going to Fantasyland, then Hull KR got a 10-point start. Not that it would help. And finally, smug cuntishness is a red card, in brackets Jake Connor. Those last two are kind of funny ones. Good to read out, but we'll move back to the more serious ideas. Dropout timer, absolute must. Get it in. I'm starting to shout at my own team now when they're wasting time at dropouts, not just the opposition.
Yeah, I mean it's in the same way as the goal kickers one, isn't it? Just bring it in dead easy.
The obstruction rule. I know that's going to come up elsewhere. What can we do about that one, Sarah?
I don't know. Again, it's like we've tried to simplify the rule but made it more easy to cheat by, than a defender throwing himself at the attacker.
Yeah, we've defined the rule that was starting to get in the way of what was, good, legitimate attempts at attack or defence, and it's kind of flipped around on its head now. And now our frustration is, like you say, with the defenders rather than the attackers.
Yeah, and it's like, you see it on a Sky match. Oh, he's gone up for an obstruction. Oh yes, that defender read the wrong line and he's thrown himself at the attack at the dummy runner. So it's not going to be given. And I don't know. I think it runs the risk of cutting out some clever attacking play.
Yeah, definitely. And it when you overdefine it, it means that the coaches are oftentimes, or some of the players, clever enough to exploit, aren't they? And that's what we're seeing, and it is making things not. It's making plays be all formulaic to try and cheat or avoid being cheated for that system, like you say.
It's not that massively affects Hull because we're not very creative with our play, so it's just the person that's running is the one that's going to run and take the ball in.
You haven't seen a dummy runner for months, have you?
No.
In black and white. You've seen some dummies running, but not a dummy
runner. Plenty of dummies running, yeah.
What about the diving one? Do you have a take on that? Because my take is, I think it's difficult for the referees to spot at the moment what is and isn't simulation.
I think it's too arbitrary. How are you going to define that? And then are you going to have a look at, the video ref? Because actually, if you saw it from the other angle, you'd see that the player's arm did come into contact with him, and how much contact is going to be acceptable before it's classed as diving.
I think the solution around that is the two refs, because you've got one who can spot what happens from behind, one from the front, and then you've got your two touch judges from the side. I think it's difficult for one man and his two touch judges, but really one of the touch judges usually is at least a bit away from the action, and one of them is patrolling a different part of the game at that stage as well with the defensive line. I just think it's tough. But I think it's a good idea of stamping it out. It's just how enforceable, and then you'll start to find referees will be even more under pressure because it becomes more about their interpretation, and it might be that some players just come across as being a bit cheaty because they celebrate tries that they never scored. So you start thinking he's diving when it might not be, because you come into it with a preconceived idea more that guy's a diver, that guy's not a diver, and it's dangerous then to say that you're being consistent and fair. But I'd love to see something that stops it. So I think that one's on the players more than a change in the rules.
Yeah.
Just stop being dicks. Do you want to take the next two, because you're kind of involved in these?
Yeah, I forgot I was co-hosting today when I replied to Tim. So Tim G says, get rid of the free play. Nobody ever uses it, and casuals don't understand it. And I had read somewhere a suggestion, which I quite like, was that keep the free play, but introduce a rule so that there's a finite amount of time that you can have for it, rather than... So it's not that, you can go halfway up the pitch and then drop the ball and then it comes back because it was an original knock-on.
Yeah, it's sort of like the advantage rule that they have in rugby union, I suppose. They play that a bit more, don't they? Like after a certain passage of time or a certain distance up the field, the referee will say advantage over sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then they go back to doing exactly the same boring middle of the field shit. But
again, it's, how do you police that? That's a tricky...
Well, I think that's one thing I do like about the free play, and I disagree with Tim to some extent as well, that it's not easy for people to understand. I think it's really easy for casuals to understand because there's been an infringement with the knock-on.
Yeah.
And so then why it's gone back to that. I think it's harder for people who've been watching the game for 40 years to understand than a new person to pick it up, because it's easier for a new person to pick that up than pick up, like, well, when does the referee decide it's an advantage or not, like you get in rugby union or you get in the NRL. I actually think it's, unless you made a rule that once he has completed a pass or once he has, once it's gone from one member of that team gaining an advantage to another member of that team, that's the advantage passed over, then I suppose that's clear. But you still have to explain it to people. So I kind of disagree with him. I like the free play. I think it introduces a bit of spontaneity when it is used, and I think it's also makes it a decision-making process for the players, whether they try and take an opportunity or not, because sometimes by using it, you might actually lose a bit of flow of momentum in the game. I think Darryl Powell on one of the other podcasts spoke about how you can find yourself with the free play sort of giving the defence a break if you then kick the ball rather than try and get the tackle, try and march up the field quickly on them whilst they're still adjusting. But if you try and do a kick for someone to chase it, then you all have to come back. It kind of gets the defence an opportunity to reset and get the breath. So
yeah, I mean, I actually quite like it as a concept, but I do think you've just got to be careful that it's not, because sometimes, as you say, I think it just goes on for too long.
Yep, Paul O'Brien at POB 1976 says, need to speed up the game, too many stoppages, would have a stop clock on dropouts. Any player who goes down and they are thinking it's a head injury has to go off. This would stop players faking injury. The obstruction rule needs changing. Right, we've covered obstruction, we've covered dropout clock. Me and you previously, when we've been on the show, have talked at length about players going down and having to go off. So you're on board with that one, I assume? Yeah, me too. I don't think we need to. But that's authoritative, Sarah. So we'll move on to Lee Whitnell's. What did Lee say?
Lee said, just make the rules consistent with the NRL and do the same with the international game.
What do you think about that?
I think there is probably a lot to be said for if we're a united sport, we should have a united set of rules. I guess consistent with the NRL doesn't necessarily mean we just pander to their rules.
Yes, I agree. I think they've got some things right. I think we've got some things right, and I think the international game maybe has some things right. I think there needs to be a top tier set of rules and then a next level down set of rules, doesn't there? Yeah. Rather than having everyone has to play the same set of rules. So what you're talking about for your top tier is NRL, Super League, and the international game have a clear set of rules where everything's the same, and for like tier 1 nation test matches 2 referees, and Super League 2 referees, and NRL 2 referees, and that sort of stuff, and all the same rules in there for that. And then you have to adapt the rules maybe slightly lower down the pyramids for where you can only have 1 referee, or I mean in Super League we only have 1 referee obviously at the moment, or where you can't have the same input from a video official, or just maybe just referees and touch judges aren't linked up by microphones. I don't know. Some different things in there. But yeah, the NRL and Super League and the top tier, the World Cup and things like that should all play to the same set of rules. I agree with Lee on that, but I totally agree with you, Sarah. It shouldn't necessarily be the NRL rulebook moved in onto everyone else's. Okay, Fatboy Rob at Fatboy_Rob says, I'd like to James Child to learn what a head-high tackle is. Good grammar, Rob. Adam Conley at AdamConley87. He says a shot clock for dropouts, or more seriously, sin binnings for players in brackets Ryan Atkins who falsely claim they've scored a try. Someone else did it this weekend, like really blatantly. I think it was in the Toulouse game against Salford. The Toulouse hooker jumped out of dummy half. I don't know if you spotted this. And he was miles away from scoring, but sort of as he got pushed back away from the goal line, the try line, he started like claiming a try. It was bonkers. But anyway, we've got one more. What do you want to cover? What Simon said? Yep,
Simon Lees at Milford Tiger says, I'd love to see some kind of change in the rules to get rid of the excessive actions from players, either trying to get others sent off or just clearly trying to influence the refs. Constant whinging players like Hill, Tompkins.
Yeah, and there's every team's got one, hasn't they? Really, but we only like to criticise the ones in the opposition. But yeah, I think there's two sections to this, isn't there? One of them is the excessive actions. I'm guessing by that it kind of, Simon, means feigning injury or and that sort of stuff, holding the head when they go down, holding the neck when there's not really been a crusher tackle at all, or that. And then there's the other one of players in the referee's ear all the time.
Yeah, in which case the referee should tell them to walk away and then penalise them for dissent.
Exactly, and if it continues,
sin
bin. The way that Robert Hicks dealt with Sam Tompkins the other week, everyone will remember that example, is the way to do it. Sam Tompkins just disagreed with the decision a little bit too much, so even though I can say I think he was right to disagree, he disagreed with this decision too much and not in the right way with the referee, so the referee turned a scrum into a penalty. He then continued to berate the sideline official, and as a result of that, it turned a penalty into a sin binning. That is the way this gets dealt with. I think that there was an example in the London Halifax game on Saturday night as well, where the hooker or loose forward Moore was challenged a decision that went against Halifax and kind of got a bit chippy, and it led to a penalty, and then off the back of that there was another error. He said something else to the match official, I'm guessing along the lines of, oh, you saw that one, didn't you, blah blah blah, whatever, and that turned it into a sin-binnable offence. And I think those sorts of things,
the rules exist currently for dealing with it, so referees need to start dealing with it.
Yeah,
it's not a rule change that's needed, it's a rule enforcement.
Yeah. I think you're spot on there, but I think it's a good point by
Yeah,
Simon
I'm not
to
disagree. Yeah,
raise.